Rob, thank you so much for being at Can't Shovel Hurricanes. This is the weirdest trip for me because the podcast was just supposed to be something that was supposed to be a resource for people around, people coming to South Florida. What it's done is connected me with blasts from the past. So we haven't seen each other in 30 years.
30 years, bro.
And if it wasn't for the podcast, we would have never, ever connected. And the way it worked out is that I get a message on Facebook saying, dude, you're in Florida? Me too. I don't know who was more floored. You saying, oh my God, what are you doing in Florida? You were like New York till I die. Right?
100 times, always. And I still New York till I die.
You were representing that Yankee hat. And to put it into context of the listeners, I mean, I lived in a little street in Canada when I moved and immigrated to Canada called Robert Hicks. It was like a closed off little community. It wasn't gated because they don't have these sorts of things. And we came from the generation where kids still played outside.
Which is what I keep trying to tell my kids to do, but yeah.
All day, every day, right? We were outside until parents called us out and like we had to be dragged in, right? We didn't have screens. We didn't have social media. We didn't have any of that noise. We just played as kids. So we played baseball. And you would come down infrequently, but you'd stay for months at a time.
I would stay for months at a time. It would be like summers. But the first couple times it was summers. Then I fell in love. And
who'd you fall in love with?
Danielle.
Oh, yeah. Oh, my God.
Yeah. And like, so that became a thing. So like every free like time that I had from school or whatever, I would like fly out, but I would stay like weeks at a time, months at a time and stuff like that. Yeah.
The first joint I ever smoked
in my house
was in your house. Yeah. I remember thinking, this stuff, it's all in your head. It's not real. Now, I don't want to disclose how young I was at that time.
Yeah.
I don't want to. It was, but I remember playing, I think it was Sega Genesis, and getting
in the basement.
stuck on the screen going, oh my God, something has altered this state.
Yeah.
Right? That was the first time I ever, and Mom, if you're listening to this, I never did it after that ever again.
And it's my fault.
But holy wow, like if it wasn't for the podcast, I would have never reconnected with you.
Yeah.
It's like, I can't even imagine that you're here, but you made it down here recently, right? Tell me about your transition from New York, why you left.
Right. So I moved here, well, not here, but like to Tampa in like 2001 after 9/11, my first marriage, and she couldn't find a job after 9/11 and stuff like that. And, times were weird. She didn't want to be in New York and stuff like that. My ex-wife.
Was it fear that drove you out?
Not necessarily for me, for her though.
Yeah.
Like, that whole feeling after 9/11 was definitely weird.
I can't even imagine.
Yeah. And I just had a baby. So like my son was like a month old when 9/11 happened.
What was that like when it hit? Like where in New York
I didn't
were
know
you?
exactly where I was. Like I was home holding my son who was a month old.
Where in New York did you live?
I lived in the Bronx then. I lived in Pelham Bay. I had a house in Pelham Bay.
How far is that from the site?
Like 8 miles. I mean, I could see the smoke. Like that night, I remember like the screen from my window like was full of ash. Like, wow. And it was just a weird time. Like, like all the cell phones were cut off. Luckily, like the Nextel worked, so I was like able to like contact people for like 2 or 3 days. But it was a weird time for sure. But she didn't feel safe after that, and like we ended up saying, okay, what's the next move? She got a job down here in Tampa, and we moved down here. Came to see it, liked the area, like going from like a 3-family house in New York to going to like a 5,000 square foot house here, like fuck.
So there was value.
There was definitely value, and it was dirt cheap back then.
Right.
But then we moved down here. After like a month of being in that house, we were like, we don't know if this is it.
Why?
Going from New York where everything was like accessible, like you walk down the street and there's a bodega,
Right.
I was 22 years old. She was like 23. And like that ease of New York, that convenience of New York was totally missing. We moved to a brand new community called Cheval in Tampa.
Was it gated?
Gated community, but I had to drive like 10 minutes.
Sure.
To a fucking gas station.
Yeah.
And that inconvenience like started like fucking with us like big time. Started like bickering and stuff like that. So then we're like, you know what? We're moving. We ended up moving to a house that was like closer to the water, closer to like Tampa. But back then, Tampa downtown was like hit or miss. Like you would drive by the highway and you would just like miss it completely. and you had to drive like through the hood to get to the nice areas in Tampa.
Okay.
It's not like here, like in Boca. It's like where you're driving, everything looks nice, right?
Look, I haven't actually been to that coast. I hear there's like a world of difference.
It's a
Although
world of difference.
Tampa's blown up, it's like it's really become
It's a
amazing.
big difference now from when I lived there. Again, like I wanted water. Like I said, you know, if I'm gonna live in Florida, I want to live close to the water. The water was like 40 minutes, no traffic. I was like, and it became a thing, and I was like, you know what, I don't want to be here. And we started bickering, got divorced a couple of years later. Now we have 2 babies. After my divorce and stuff like that, and the money wasn't there. I had a pawn shop
In Tampa.
and like it was okay business wise, but it was like in the middle of the hood. And my friends would come down. They were like, "Bro, this is horrible." Like the neighborhood was like crappy, like where the pawn shop was, and they were just like, "This is not you." And you know, I was like alone. She had some family here. I had no family here. My family was all in New York.
Right.
So after the divorce, a couple years later, I moved back. But it was tough.
You moved back to the Bronx?
I moved back to the Bronx. But it was tough having 2 babies. I would fly down here every month.
Of course.
To see them and spend time with them. And then the divorce and like all the shit that came with that.
Was it ugly? I don't know if there's such a thing as a nice divorce, but
It was the divorce itself wasn't ugly. Like everything else after that was ugly. Like relationships, like her relationships and different things. And like also like between us, like the constant bickering of like, you know, where the kids should go to school and all these different things.
Did you want them to go back to New York?
At one point I did, because, you know, like we both knew our way around in New York, right? So I was like, listen, I think it would be best if we're both here, the money's here, because the money just wasn't here.
So you shut down the pawn shop or you sold it?
I sold it. I sold my end. I had like 25%, so I sold my end and just like went back to New York. And everything in court like kept going her way. So at some point I was like, you know what, like let me just, you know, cut my losses here, go up there, kind of reset. But then I was like, you know, spending all the money coming down to visit them all the time. Then the judge, after like a year and a half of like constantly flying down in courts and stuff like that, the judge like pulled me aside and was like, listen, you got 2 choices. You either come here, stay with your kids, take care of them, babysit them, whatever you got to do. You won't pay child support. Or you can live your life, like keep doing what you're doing, like progress, get to what you need career-wise, and then make a choice. And she gave me that option and gave me like an hour to think about it. Because my ex was like being like total, like misleading, like putting information where, you know, she would, and the judge didn't like that. And I thought about it. I just like looked at my kids and I'm like, you know, like I think this is time for me to do that reset. I was working retail, even though I had a degree. And that helped me.
All right, so you went back to New York. Now you've kind of settled with what you're going to do with your ex-wife and your kids, all right? I'm sure it was really, really difficult to go back to New York. How long did you stay in New York before you decided to come back?
So it was tough, man, because so that was 2005 that I went back, and then I didn't come back until 2018. And
Why did you come back if you didn't like it so much the first go around?
So I said, okay, it was not going to be Tampa. I knew it was not going to be Tampa for me. All the jobs in IT, and that's the field that I'm in, right? We're all down in South Florida. So I'm like, if I'm down in Miami or whatever, like to drive to Tampa 3-4 hours, like for that I fly down. And to deal with the traffic down here, I was like, I know my way around New York. I can escape the traffic. I'm like, nah. Like even to this day, like Miami is not it for me. Like the traffic down here, the people.
It is brutal. And if people don't understand like what brutal traffic is, like it is. I know New York gets crazy. I mean, it's got the subway system, so it's like spaghetti. You drop it down, and it's got all these places. It doesn't work like that.
A car in New York is a luxury.
Yeah, sure.
Like you ride the subway all day and you're good.
Yeah.
Like, but down here you need a car.
You do not have a choice. Everything is distance spread out. How big it is. Yep. The public transit is not what people expect, hard. Right? And there is such major inconsistencies. And to tell people, like when I was going into North Miami to do some of my credentialing for my broker's license, I would leave sometimes 2 hours before, giving myself ample time, here. And I'd still be from Boca, and I'd still be late because one accident and then the I-95, that's it, gridlock.
Yep.
Right. So you come back here.
So I'm here 2017, Christmas of 2017. I drove down to see the kids. Now, you know, with my ex-wife and stuff like that. You know, I got nostalgic. Every time I would come down and have all 4 kids together, you know, I would get nostalgic. I wanted to be closer to them.
Sure.
And I just applied. And they called me like a week later.
To do what?
To take over a position in another telecommunications. I worked in telecommunications up in New York. So it was a similar executive position down here. But the money wasn't there. So I denied them 10 times.
In Tampa?
Sarasota.
In Sarasota, right.
Yeah. I definitely like Sarasota. Like, close to the beach. I knew the area. Like, I've traveled up and down. Like, so I knew Sarasota I liked.
All right.
So I said, I could definitely do Sarasota. And, but the money wasn't there. Like, they flew me down. They gave me, like, you know, they wine and dine me. And just the money wasn't there. And, like, I kept saying no. And, like, the 10th time, like, my boss at the time was like, all right, what's it going to take to bring you down? And I was like, well, if you get to this number, I could forego, like, overtime and all the other stuff, you know, state taxes down here, whatever.
Right.
And she was like, okay, let's do it. At the time, I was like, you know what? I talked to one of my friends, talked to my mom. And it was rough. My mom was going through cancer at the time. She was the 3rd time that her cancer had returned.
Shit.
She had ovarian cancer. And my mom was like, listen, like, you don't owe me anything. You have those 2 kids down there. And at the time, like, they were 15 and 16. And she was like, you owe them to be there with them, at least, you know, for the time you have, right? I'll be okay. And I moved down here, and like a month later, like, we got the news that she was terminal. So that was rough. So, like, transition, I'm trying to find a place to live. I was, like, living with relatives that my ex-wife had that I'm still pretty close to. And I found a place in Sarasota, and I said, okay, it's time to come down. The kids came down. So now I had all 4 kids, like, you know, in the house at all times. And that paid itself, right? But the battle with my mom was tough. I had to keep flying up to New York, like, every couple of weeks. And then she ended up, like, being, you know, it was either the choice of putting her in a hospice or, like, sending her down to Dominican Republic to be with family. And it was a tough choice. And my sister and I, like, had, like, a big argument about it because I wanted to put her in a hospice in New York. My mom, like, trained me for that, right? My mom would tell me, like, you have to be the one to make these choices. Like, your sister won't be able to make these tough choices. But it was a battle.
What did your mom want?
My mom wanted me to not spend money on her and you know, to put her in a home and let her live her days.
Dude, moms are like superheroes.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm very fortunate to still have mine.
Yeah.
But my dad went through a very similar story.
I know. I think we connected around that time too.
Yeah. You reached out. This is the craziest part about, you know, the podcast brought you in front of me. Yeah. And you're just like, listening to this makes me feel all kinds of stuff.
I know.
Social media is not very social. Most people are posting things.
Yeah.
But there are people that come in and out of your life that, you know, you lose contact with because life. You know, you're in New York, I'm in Canada, where you growing up, everybody's got families. Look at all the history you're giving.
And there's a couple of times you came up to New York and we
couldn't connect. I know. And then you were in Toronto and I'm at the same time trying to come down here. So I'm like, I want to, but I can't.
I know.
There's just so much going down.
I know.
But people that are from fond memories in your life, it's easier to pick up right where you left off.
Yeah, it's like that book, right? You keep that book there and
Yes.
you kind of say, oh shit, look at the book. You pick it up and it's like, wow, you remember the book and everything right where you left off. Like, this feels like supernatural, even 30 years later. So
Yeah, that's it. And I hope that, you know, we're going to see each other a lot more. But
I'm down here a lot. So
I see, you know, something I hate about you is that the fact that you don't age. I don't know how you do it. Like, I really don't know how you do it. You lost a lot of weight from when I remember you. Now, mind you, that's a while back.
Yeah. No, listen.
I've been stalking you on Facebook here and there. You know what I mean? But
no, so so I moved down here 2018. I was about 260 pounds.
Wow, that's a lot.
Yeah, but listen, the stress of New York. As much as I love New York, a lot of stress. And then I moved down here, like, it was less stress. Like, I was out on a boat because I lived in Sarasota. Like, my house was, like, 8 miles from the nicest beach in like USA, Siesta Key, right? And just like the lifestyle change, and then COVID happened, right? COVID happened. Second divorce now because like my ex.
You didn't learn your lesson the first time?
I guess not.
You gonna get married again?
Can't say you can't say never because I said never the first time.
You know, even baseball's got 3 strikes, right?
I know. Trust me, and it's tough because I said never after the first time, and then
Sure.
I did it again. But like my kids are grown now. My son.
You started early.
I did. My oldest is gonna be 22.
Wow.
My youngest, and he's like your wife, like deals with like autism, right? So
Is that right?
My oldest is autistic.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And it was like, and trust me, like what it is now compared to what it was then, like it was still like infancy stages. Like they didn't really know.
Sure.
Like they gave you like a paper, oh, he's autistic. And you were like, okay, what do I do with this now? You know?
Yeah.
But now like there's so many resources now.
I'm willing to bet you that when we grew up, when we were in school, there was a lot of kids that were either not diagnosed or misdiagnosed, and they were considered, the weird or quirky kids. And they were usually the smartest, most focused, incredible kids that knew stuff way beyond, but we just couldn't understand it, and we were taught.
Well, especially in New York, man. Like the New York public school system, like you had regular classes, you had like higher learning classes, and then you had special ed.
Right.
Everyone that was probably autistic went into special ed and got lost in that shuffle. Like it was, and I've thought about it for many years because like I joined like Autism Speaks.
Yeah,
which
sure,
was
of
in
course.
New York,
I know the
for
organization
my son and those resources. That was another thing, like part of that bickering in my first marriage. Like we found out he was autistic and the services were there, not here. And when he would come up, I would take him in the summertime.
So you're saying there's better services in Florida?
No, in New York.
Okay.
Yeah.
I know that New York actually, now Florida, to
they've
come
caught up.
Yeah, big
caught
time because of the blow up in population of people that are now coming to live here with young kids. But I do know New York has a reputation for really being on the forefront when it comes to the autism spectrum.
Yep.
Yeah, my wife speaks to that too.
Yeah. No. So, and we saw that. So I would like take him up there and like spend 3 months, like taking him every day to Autism Speaks.
Did it help?
In some ways, yes. I would see an improvement, but since it wasn't constant, like it would kind of fall back. And then like here, the services just weren't great at all. Like he would have like a pathologist come like every 2 days, while in New York I could take him like every day.
Right. It's consistency.
Yeah.
Right? And early intervention is very, very key.
Right. And that was the problem. Like he was like 2.5 when we found out. Like, so yes, there was early intervention, but
It wasn't
at what
consistent.
rate?
Right. Look, I'll do a comparison to Canada, for example. Although you would have liked more consistency, in Canada there is very little to almost no financial support, and it's purely private pay.
Even till this day.
Yeah, because the way the system is designed, it is a universal healthcare system, so it comes out of the tax dollars that everybody pays. Unfortunately, not everybody is dealing with the same struggles and challenges. And autism is one of those things that is hugely underrepresented and unsupported. And I know some people may freak out listening to this.
It's the truth, though.
I see it and I hear it, and there's pros and cons to healthcare. I've taken sides, and I have my opinions, and I have my own struggles with the healthcare system here alone. Because when you come from Canada, where it's like you just walk into a hospital or make an appointment and it's just there, and you go home and you don't think about it again, there's something to be said about that. Yeah. Here the other day, it's actually happened to me more than once, where I went to a doctor, paid for the doctor, and then I got invoiced by that doctor, thinking maybe you can slip one through the cracks, right? And yeah, that happens here, though. I was warned about it, and then I had a situation where I went to a doctor in my network, and because we're on a visa, we don't get the same access to the same marketplace products that everyone else does. But
in New York, you would.
Is that right?
Yeah. So in New York, like there's money set aside for immigrants. Like you can,
but I'm not an immigrant.
No. But like for instance, like they don't really care, right? So as long as you're like there on a visa, and you don't have a green card yet, right?
No.
Right. So do you have a Social Security yet?
I do.
Okay. So in that aspect, right? So
But my kids don't.
Your kids don't. Right. So in that aspect, you can just take them and it's fully covered.
See, I don't know anything about New York, so you're probably
Here's
right.
a different animal.
When I come down here, it's nothing. Like everything is taking us back. Like we don't have any credit. We need to rebuild that up, and that's critical. People don't put enough emphasis on how important credit is here, and how important it is to rebuild it, and how long it takes. The healthcare thing is definitely something to stick handle. I have a constant argument specifically with Canadians. They're like, healthcare is so expensive here. It's free in Canada. I'm like, you need to stop saying free. It's not free. Right. It comes out of your tax dollars. Nothing is free, right?
Nothing in the world is free. Yeah.
And is it perfect? No. Is the American system perfect? No. Hell no. I think if you fall into the categories when you need support and help, and it works for you, and it helps you, then you're going to be a staunch advocate of that. I don't know enough about the American system. The only thing I could say pros and cons this far is that if I need access, it's way easier for me to get access to a specialist, or if I need an MRI here. I get paid for it, but I have access. Whereas in Canada, you really have to advocate and navigate the system through your networks and resources, because it doesn't work quite the same way. Now, look.
Right. So we found out, like, for instance, like my ex-wife worked, my soon-to-be ex-wife.
You still. She
wants to have the papers.
Oh, okay.
It's a long story on that one.
So you still officially only have one divorce under your belt.
Exactly.
Oh, okay. Good.
Yeah. But it's just been a long process, very long process. But in that aspect, right? So she worked in the healthcare industry in New York. So like insurance was like zero copay, everything was covered.
Okay.
And then my insurance working in New York was really good. So it was like, if a kid was sick, it was either her insurance or my insurance. Most of the time it was hers, because it was like zero copay, and her birthday was before mine. So when the kids went to get medical care, it automatically went under hers. So that's how it works here. Okay. So if you have two parents and you both have medical insurance, it goes by whoever's birthday is first.
Okay.
So if hers doesn't cover whatever, then it flows to that secondary insurance for the kids.
I did not know that.
Yep. You find that quickly in most ways. It's like she knew those things because she worked in that field, so it was easy for her. But when we moved here, the insurance for women here is a lot higher than it is for men.
You mean cost?
The cost, just like even a copay, or just like looking for insurance. Like if you look for insurance for you, for instance, like you're trying to get private insurance now that you move here, for you it's like $200 a month. But if you add your wife, it's like $600 a month.
Yeah, well, my family plan's high.
Right. But it's cheaper to have a family plan without your wife than it is to have her with. So
are you trying to advocate for divorce and the benefits?
No, not in that sense. Just like how expensive it is here in Florida for women, period. Because in New York, like, if it was a family, everybody, like, it was one copay, one monthly fee. But, like, when we moved here, it was like, okay, what insurance am I going to look for at work, right? I had two options. One was like $1,100 a month.
For the whole family. For
the whole family, including her.
Plus deductibles and copays and all that stuff.
Tons of deductibles, like ridiculous amount of deductibles. Like in New York, like I had no deductible. Neither did she.
It's amazing moving from state to state, even though you're in the same country. Yeah. And I hear that South Florida here is like the capital for medical fraud.
I was going to say,
I don't know if that's good. I'm talking hearsay. I hear it from people. I don't know if it's a case. I've had people.
There's more medical companies here coming up every single day in South Florida than anywhere else.
Why is that?
Because it's easy money. Here you have like Humana, you have Medicare, and I've seen that for years because I've had a lot of family members that have lived in the area for a while. And trust me, they were always like on some different, like, oh, we're doing this now. We're doing ambulatory. Or we're doing this. Wherever the money flowed, they went.
I got you.
So you see that ball rolling, and they'll just, all these pop-up companies just keep pulling up, and whichever one makes money, that's the one that it is.
It is so foreign, especially to a Canadian. Like for me.
But you don't find that anywhere else other than South Florida.
Oh, wow. Okay, that explains why premiums are probably so high here, and it's so hard to get insurance. And then when you walk into a doctor's office, they size you up. And
it's a different world. South Florida to the rest of Florida, it's a different world, different dynamic.
Explain that.
So, for instance, like South Florida, you have the mixture of like the Cubans that came and the Mariel, right? So they're like Republican. hardcore Republicans because Reagan brought them here. So they owe it forever.
I'd never. It makes sense, but I didn't think about it.
Trust me, like you talk to like any old Cuban, and there's no question about that. Like
you're originally from Dominican Republic.
I am Dominican, right?
That make you a Republican too?
I didn't come from Cuba.
No, I know. I'm not conflating the two.
No.
I'm just saying, is it the same ideology?
No. So like in the aspect, right? So for instance, like especially my family was very left leaning.
Okay.
In Dominican Republic, so kind of went with the same movement here.
Sure.
And then being in New York, like you go from DR, right?
Yeah.
Move to New York. Not many people that I know that came from Dominican Republic are Republican.
Right.
And the ones that like became Republican or came as Republican like during the Trump movement, I was like, that's weird.
So hold up. Now that you moved to Florida, does that automatically make you a Republican?
What does it my friends say?
Republican light?
No. They say I'm Democrat by heart, but my tax bracket is Republican.
I never heard that. It's awesome.
Yeah, no, and it's a big change. Like,
and that's what people talk about a lot about the tax bracket because it's major, especially coming from New York.
But even in the different movements, right? Like working in the IT field and like getting up in the ranks in IT, you kind of like start moving in the same path as many Republicans, right? Like I lived in Westchester after moving from the Bronx, and my office was in Long Island. So I had an office in Long Island, one in Westchester, and most of the people that I work with were Republicans. Now I didn't know. I mean, I should have known, but I didn't know.
Doesn't matter.
No, but there was like a lot of things that came up like during the Trump election,
right?
That were like, wait, am I hearing right? Like I started feeling alone at some point. Right, I would hear what they were saying. And I'm like, but I thought we were cool, and it started like fucking with you, even though like
it's that divisive between people.
It was, because you would hear them kind of repeat the words that he was saying. And
so, what did you think? What was the thing you didn't agree with the most? Did you find that they were like starting to encroach on things that were more personal? Do you think like racism played a part in it?
It sounded very racist.
Really, overtly.
Yeah.
To your face.
Oh yeah. Yeah, especially I remember my son, we were watching a debate and like Trump was talking about like, like sending like all the immigrants back to like the shithole countries or go back, whatever,
Yeah.
And my son Max is like 13 now, so he was like 7, right? And he started crying. And I'm like, why are you crying? He's like, well, like you and grandma are going to have to go back to DR. And I was like, why? He's like, because you weren't born here. And I remember, like, I stayed up, like, the night of the election, and I stayed up, like, super late, and I was just crying. And I started crying because of how he felt. He took those words as, like, immigrants are not welcome here.
Which is the premise of the United States, right?
100%.
Bring us your
everything
coal,
I saw when I
hungry.
was a kid, and especially in New York, all the freaking, like, ships coming to Ellis Island and, like, the
melting pot.
The Tony, you heard the story, right? To New York.
Yeah.
That's why all the dudes are named Tony, right?
Yeah.
And I'm like, wait, that's kind of like what we're built on.
Yeah.
And now you're kind of changing that. And my kid was like, well, you weren't born here, so you got to go back.
Right.
Even though I'm American.
So you never hear stuff like that. Like I'm considered a Republican, I guess, if I was allowed to vote, but I'm like Republican light, which people told me, because there's some things that I really don't. I don't aspire to ever become like a gun-toting Republican, although I have no issues with firearms and I'll probably own them. But I don't look at it as like we need to load up for the government. Yeah. But I will tell you that I think that Florida was an anomaly when it came to COVID lockdowns compared to Canada because people were armed to the teeth.
Well, even on that aspect, right? So like during COVID, like all these changes happened, right? South Florida was locked down. But in Sarasota, wide open.
Wait, so all right, so when you came back after not liking it. You've been here since 2018.
2018.
Right? Would you ever leave this place again?
No.
Are you totally in love now?
Yes.
What's different now than it was before?
Sarasota.
And what specifically about Sarasota?
It's so chill. Like it's like a beach town with money.
Okay. You've now left twice. Obviously, you weren't in the same place. Have you noticed a major change in Florida over the last couple of years?
Right. That's where I was going. So like since COVID, it's a different animal. Like Sarasota had like 300,000 people.
Okay.
Like no traffic. I could get anywhere within 15 minutes. I could walk into any restaurant at any time. Like no reservation. In the last 18 months, you're talking about like 15,000 families moving to like
to stay, to live.
Yeah, in Sarasota, Bradenton. Like they found it. I was talking to a friend of mine. He's like, bro, I saw this shit online, and I was like, yeah, man. Like, and all of a sudden I see Dominicans around here. It's like time to move. They found me, you know. And it's funny because when I got here, I was like, I would see no Latinos, especially Dominicans. I would have to go to Tampa. We'll go to a baseball game. I'm a diehard Yankee fan, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Every time the Yankees play the Rays, I'm there, and I would see Dominicans. I'm like, okay, we're good. And I would go back to Sarasota and like not see any Latinos other than like maybe like a couple in like, the schools where my kids were in. And now it's like I see Dominicans everywhere. I see people I haven't seen in New York in 30 years in Sarasota because they've moved here. They're like, oh shit, what are you doing? I'm like, I was here first. I know that
you were here first. Like you were in Florida first, you know, post 9/11. I mean, right. And then you went back. But you came down here not only reestablishing your tech space, you opened up a couple of businesses in like the boating space, right? Like
so that's fresh. That boating space is fresh. So I partnered up with a boat club and stuff like that. But I was doing my own thing with boats and trying to like getting it up there.
How'd you get into that? Because New York's not a boating place.
It is.
Is it?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, like especially if you live like in Westchester, you live in Long Island, especially Long Island. Long Island.
I guess I should know that. That's a stupid thing for me to say.
And New York is like, especially like, you know, if especially in the summertime, like New York is big on like boats on the river, on the Hudson,
right?
Pulling up at different places, and that's a whole like wave, you know, like it's like pulling up in a Lamborghini, like pull up.
Did you have a boat in New York?
I've always wanted to.
Were you part of one of these boat clubs?
I tried to join one up there, but it didn't make sense because the seasons are so short.
Right.
Now, that boat club I wanted to join was Freedom Boat Club, and they had like nationwide. So you could come here and go different places. And I thought about it. When I moved here the first year, I did it. And I didn't like it because whatever they were selling wasn't really what I experienced. So like you would basically pay the monthly, pay your initiation fee, and then they say, oh yeah, it'll be available weekends and all these.
Never available.
I had it for a year and like never.
I heard a lot about that. What about what you're doing
This
now?
one is different. This one gears to, it's called Jet Ride, and it gears to like a younger base. Like even if like you look at their social media is like very young and very like loosey goosey. And they're like joining up, like, you know, putting boats in different places, like ride sharing. So if you have a boat, they're trying to put you on there too. So that's
like a Turo for boats? Something
similar to that. That's kind of how it works. But necessarily is their own thing. It's like a big fleet that they have.
Cool.
But yeah, it's a different aspect. And trust me, I've been telling everyone like to join up. And
so you've partnered with them?
In a sense, yeah.
Right. And what is it that your company does?
So basically, we're trying to get the space for people to like rent boats. So I have my own boat,
okay,
right, that I like rent out to different people,
okay,
in the Sarasota region. But trying to get them to like open up to different aspects, so you can go. Like, let's say you want to come down for a weekend, you need a boat,
right?
Get you a captain, get you out there,
cool.
Put you on the water, you just chill for the whole day, take it to a sandbar, you know. That's basically what you do.
So we would contact you. You'd set it all up. We'd have somebody.
So I have different contacts like through the areas that you could send to me, and then I'll put them in contact with people here. Pompano. I don't have anything Boca yet. Trying to get different places in Miami.
Talk to me, man. Plug it. How do people get a hold of you? How do people set this up?
My social media. So my social media is now for like the rentals, right? So mostly for the cars. So it's Phoenix Exotics is what we call it.
Right.
We're on Instagram, so they could just DM me there. And
so you guys also have access to cars? Like
cars is our number one.
Okay.
So we have...
so you've transitioned into the boating.
Kind of like putting it through. The boating is fresh, very fresh.
Okay.
The cars has definitely been a thing for like a year and a half now. Through Turo or like directly through us. You could rent cars. We have Sarasota, Tampa, and I'm trying to like get a couple of cars down here in Miami. Just have people like having Corvettes and Lambos
Sure.
out here, so trying to get that out here.
It's very common.
Yeah, yeah. Sarasota is like very family friendly.
Right. So is Boca. But you know, a lot of people open up the garage and then you see a whip that you didn't really expect.
Right.
It's like, oh my God, you got $500,000 sitting in the
Right.
garage that you never drive.
Yeah.
Right?
Sarasota is very much like that. Like there's like car clubs every weekend. Like I pull up to my office and there's like a car club out front, like a whole bunch of Lambos and Ferraris. Like, yeah, no, but it's money.
I think people don't understand
The level of money.
the level of wealth that is here. And it used to be transient wealth, meaning snowbirds and people coming in infrequently. But that is a shift that's towards families, towards people plugging in communities, staying, growing, wanting to raise families, build business.
But it sells itself. Like,
Yeah.
for instance, like how many friends and family have you had come down since you moved down here?
So it's funny you should ask. We have a 5-bedroom house. One room we designed to be an office and guest room. We've been here now. I think we're pushing 10 months. Right. I'd say that at least 50% of the time, somebody has been down here.
There you go.
And we were told in the first year that's exactly what was going to happen. The second year, everybody buys.
And they're looking to buy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that's what I'm doing for them, right? I'm going to end up picking up a spot for them. If they want to use it infrequently, we rent it out. We property manage it for them. Or we rent it out on a longer term rental, and then they use it when they want to come down. But what people want to do now, and this is a very common conversation with I'm having, people that are in my age demographic, a little bit higher, mainly around like my brother's age, who's 8 years older. They're saying, we eventually want a space here. We see what's happening here. We want to buy now and not pay 10 years from now prices or 15 years when we decide to come down.
That's like the tale is all this time. Like,
but that's what we're doing for them. So we're buying it for them. We're finding, we're looking for these assets.
You're holding it for them.
Holding it, renting it, property managing for them.
Nice.
And then by the time they come down, and the cash flow is so positive here right now that if you're renting it out, you get to keep coin and it stays down here. And then when you come down, you have play money. Like not only somebody paying down your insurance, your property tax, your mortgage, you've also got money to spend when you come down here. So it's a pretty cool phenomenon.
So like it's a question I wanted to ask you. So in that aspect, like coming here.
Yeah.
Right. For you, did you have to like apply for visa or was it like?
Oh yeah, it was a whole process. It's a long process. There's multiple visas that you can get down here. I'm on what's called an E2 visa. And the reason we went that route is because of my wife's specialty and what she does. And we expanded her location from Canada down here. And
so that's the one that you like build a business and then kind of like flows.
And you have to invest. And you have to.
There's a figure. There's a sum.
We were told, the magic number was 100,000, but then you can buy businesses that are 300,000. You can buy businesses that are slightly less. I think also the amount of space or the kind of space that you're in is really important. Like we were offered the craziest businesses. One of the businesses that was offered to me on the process to purchase, to invest in, was a homicide cleanup business where you come in after, murder scenes.
Like a coroner.
Yeah, but you have to clean it up. And it was a very profitable business.
Down here,
I couldn't do it.
Especially in Miami? Yeah, for sure.
What do you mean? Don't scare me, man. First of all, I'm in Palm Beach County, so that's
listen, you're a little higher up here. You're like kind of away from that. Miami's New York.
Are you trying to tell me that
Miami's New York light?
So, hold on. What is more unsafe, New York or here? And where was New York heading? Because I heard all kinds of things.
People will tell you like these horror stories about New York, and like, listen, I go to New York often, right? I'm there like every.
Do you ever feel unsafe?
No.
Is it because you know your way around?
Right.
But if you're a tourist or you're new?
So I think people feel unsafe like in South Florida, depending where they walk. Right?
I have, okay.
But in New York, like there's so much movement. You don't see that kind of movement here, right? There's so much movement in New York. You kind of like flow into traffic as a tourist, right?
Yeah.
So you kind of like get lost in the shuffle and you kind of feel like, oh, okay, I made it. You're good. But here it's like all this open space and you kind of walk alone in certain places and it gets kind of dark. You turn around, you're like, oh, what's going on here? And you see a lot of that. But there's all these like hidden agendas down in South Florida that you don't get in New York. Like New York is like, it's hard for someone in New York to just come up to you and like, rob you in gunpoint, right?
Because of just the amount of people?
The amount of people. Someone's going to see something,
Okay.
right? But like, I feel like down here, like, you could get comfortable and things can happen.
What was New York like peak COVID?
I don't want to get emotional, but I've never seen it like that. I remember flying up like October of 2020, and it was dead. Like, I've never seen New York like that. Walking out of an apartment, and there's nothing. Like, just, like, you see, like, birds chirping. I'm like, I've never heard a fucking bird in New York. Like,
There's animals in New York?
yeah.
It's a concrete jungle.
Yeah. No, but listen, like, you've seen, like, I Am Legend, right?
Yeah.
It was
Oh
like
my
that.
God.
It felt
No,
like that.
Really?
Bro, it felt like that. Because you were walking and you
That's
would
terrifying.
see shit, like, moving around. You're like, what? I don't remember this. But just, like, not seeing people in the streets and then seeing, like, all these, like, pop-up restaurants, like, on the sidewalk. Like, 'cause you couldn't, like, dine inside.
Right.
But here, like, bro, like, Labor Day in Sarasota, there was, like, 4 million people.
Why do you think it was so different here than it was in New York?
That's a lot of politics in there, for sure. Even, for instance, like, South Florida, more Democratic. Even though there's a lot of Republicans down here, there's a lot of new transplants.
Right.
Like a lot of New Yorkers down in this area, they made the shift because they like the hustle and bustle. Like, so that's why I said Miami is New York light. Or even people tell you they live in Miami, but they don't live in Miami, right? They live in Miramar, Pembroke, which I prefer to Miami.
That's more like suburbia?
It's a little bit north for sure. And you get like a little more bang for your buck for
Right.
sure. Definitely not an apartment. You have like a nice little house.
Right. Traffic isn't as bad. Still bad?
It's still bad.
Yeah.
Especially like in the afternoon and stuff like that. It's people move wherever they got to go to get to work.
Right.
I mean, I've heard of people like working in Miami and living in Naples and vice versa,
That's crazy.
and making that ride. Fort Myers too. That's insane. Like 2.5 hours or whatever it is.
Sure. But I used to hear stuff like that in New York. If you lived in Long Island and need to get into the city,
But that was different.
you need
were
to
just
take
stuck in
like
traffic.
ferries and trains.
You were just stuck in traffic.
and all that. And I'm like, wow, okay, dude.
For instance, like my office in Long Island, I lived in Westchester. It was 45 miles. But there was never any traffic. The traffic was flowing one way, and I was going against traffic all the time. Hardly ever saw traffic. And you entertain yourself. There's so much to see in New York, right? But here, like, you're like on 75. Have you gone up Alligator Alley?
No, I have not actually.
Well, come and see me, and you'll see it.
I will.
And
Oh, you got to
there's
take me out on the
nothing.
boat.
Yeah, definitely. Come out there. We're going on the boat. But you're going up that way, and there's nothing. So you're bored. Like, you're just bored.
Yeah.
Like, you don't entertain yourself, so the ride feels a lot longer.
Right.
And the only problem is, like, when I have family, like, flying in from DR, or, like, for instance, my niece and her boyfriend are here from Stockholm, from Sweden. That's where my sister lives. And I got to come down here to pick them up. There's no flights to Tampa.
Sure.
There's like one a week, but they're super stupid expensive. So they fly to Miami. I come down for like the weekend, pick them up, take them home, and stuff like that. At times I've done it like in a day. Cause
Have you ever done it taking the boat down the coast?
not yet,
That would be so cool.
not yet. Well, my dream is hopefully in 10 years I want to live on a boat.
Wow.
That's my dream. I want to live on a boat, and like trust me, in Sarasota I see it. I pull up to like there's a tiki at O'Leary's. There's a bar in Sarasota. There's a family that lives on a boat, and he like brings his kids like on a little raft, like to take the bus in the morning. It's the coolest thing.
And you can actually homestead a boat if it fits
Yep.
the requirements.
If it's
so
on
it's
a slip.
considered a home,
Yep.
right?
Yep.
You can homestead as long as and what people don't know what homesteading. We've touched on it in the podcast a couple of times. I'm no expert,
Tax
so
purpose. Tax.
yeah, it's a way to shelter cash in case things don't work out for you the way you wanted to.
Well, it also locks down. Like, so for instance, like for a snowbird, it locks down basically where your taxes are going to be paid.
Right.
So, like,
Right.
for instance, like I did the back and forth in New York a lot. And then once I got the house down here, they were like, okay, this is homestead.
Right.
Everything flows in here
Right.
and
So
locks you in.
so you're not subject to the state tax, which you would have been in New York if you were there.
New York still has a couple of stipulations there because, like, for instance, like if you work in New York City you have to pay. You work in New York City and live in New York City, you have to pay city tax, state tax, and of course the federal tax rate of New York.
Right.
But if you move to Westchester or Long Island and your job doesn't have a footprint in the city, you don't have to pay city tax.
Oh, cool.
Just federal and state. That's why a lot of people move to Long Island and move to Westchester or move to Jersey.
That's now why a lot of people are moving into
And now
Florida.
Right, and you work remote. As long as they have like a footprint here, then you don't have to pay New York taxes. So a lot of people have migrated, especially Miami. A lot of people have moved from an apartment in New York. They're like, listen, like I'm stuck in New York, 2-bedroom apartment. Now I could at least like go to the beach or like see sun or whatever, not have to deal with snow. So a lot of that was definitely part of the reason a lot of people moved down here.
And there's still tons of value in what you can acquire here. For now, that's going to change.
It depends where you go.
Sure, of course.
Like you can't touch in Sarasota, you can't touch anything under below $500,000.
Right.
And that's like a shack.
And that's probably changed a lot over the last little while.
So for instance, like I bought a house in Sarasota for $305. I sold that house in a year and a half for $420.
Wow.
The same house next door, no comps compared to mine, sold for like $900 something.
Yes, that's what's happening because people are coming here to stay. They're not coming here to just
people were just coming down with like cash and they were like, listen, we'll pay $100 over like asking.
I'm one of those people.
Well, there you go.
I got really, it's a whole different
your
conversation.
neighbors like give you the finger every time they walk around.
Nah, are you kidding me?
Well, no,
I've raised all their property values.
Right.
I'm the sucker who gave them all a bump when you do the comparisons. When you do your CMA, they pull up my house 99 times out of 100 because now they're like, oh yeah, well he was dumb enough to pay. But a home is a lifestyle choice. It's not an investment. We've been taught that it's an investment. It is a lifestyle choice. Point blank simple. Your second, your third, your fourth, those are investments. It's purely a calculation of money in, money out, and there's positive cash flow here everywhere.
But you've been here almost a year.
Almost a year.
I've been here for 5. I love it.
Yes, so do I.
Okay.
I wouldn't change this for the world. I don't know enough about the things I don't like yet, but there is a honeymoon phase, and this is a very difficult transition.
Yes.
But I'll say that change is good. When you step out of your comfort zone is good.
It's good.
It's hard.
But not everyone can make that. Like people, I like being uncomfortable.
It has to be, your why has to be strong enough,
right?
Especially when you're doing it with kids, right? And you've done this twice, so you've kind of figured it out.
Well, the first time, like my son was a baby when I moved here, so we were young, and we weren't looking at
poses
schools.
its own challenges,
right? Exactly. So it was really more for us, like time and space that we wanted, right? But the second time around, I was like the job. But number one is like, okay, my kids are schooled here, even though my kids were schooled in New York, and I lived in Westchester, and I paid Westchester taxes. I wanted the best school system I could get. So other than like Coral Gables, right, which is like super high end, Sarasota afforded that. Like grade, 9, 10 schools. Like you look up grade schools, Sarasota will always like pull up as like best schools in Florida.
Right.
So it was like, okay, let's make this choice for them because this is the best position for them and for us at the end.
Rob, I'm going to tell you that the podcast has grown beyond my wildest imagination.
You're made for this, man.
But it brought me back to people that I haven't seen in years, that have fascinating stories, that have transitions. And I, like, you and I could do this
for days.
Yeah. And it feels good because, like, it's real and it's authentic. How do people get a hold of you or your boating company?
Just like Phoenix Exotics on
Instagram?
Phoenix_exotics. Somebody was asking me yesterday what it was, but
do you have an email or phone number that you want to
yeah, they could definitely reach out to me via email, Phoenix Exotics LLC at gmail.com or 917-51. Still got the New York number in there. You see that? Never going to give up the NY. 917-513-5007.
Rob, you're the best. I want to have you on again. You got to take me out on the boat.
We're going to do it on the boat.
I want to. Yeah, that would be awesome. We could talk about that experience.
Yeah.
Dude, thanks for coming.
Yeah, thanks, man.